Hello and welcome to a Week 8 edition of Football and Grits, Brody. I don't even know. I guess this is technically talking about Week 8 going into Week 9, I guess. Who knows? What I do know, Brody, is that coming into this season, I was very down on LSU, in
Yeah.
part, in general, because of the lack of depth, and then watching Florida State, who I did not think was very good coming into the season, and how much that offense struggled in that game. I felt like it only confirmed my own thoughts coming into the year. Haven't seen a ton of impressive things from them until Saturday, where they beat a very good Ole Miss team. And I think, Brody, from my perspective, this was the first time that LSU has maybe sit up and take notice and say, oh, this is a team. They're not sitting there at is it 5-2 or 6-2? Either way,
6-2. Yeah.
6-2, and they control their own fate in the SEC West. Most importantly, they'll have a mammoth showdown with Bama. It's hard for me to see them, this version of LSU, beating this version of Alabama, but that's why they play the games.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're in this position, Brody, this is not. I thought this was a 6-win team, 7-win team at best. They are not. My question to you, Brody, you've seen this team very closely. How much of this is improvement from camp, from the Florida State game, and how much of this is just people underestimated LSU coming into this year and chalked this up to a rebuild, considering all they lost in the portal, despite what they added in the portal as well?
Yeah, I think it genuinely, for the most part, for me, is improvement. And that's kind of the thing. And yeah, I think we're on the same page. I don't think either of us think they're really going to win the SEC, or anything like that. But what you have to, and we're both taking such focus on it. What matters here is that they are improving, and that is the main thing. I think you highlight year one under Brian Kelly, even if they finish 8-4, it's just that is important, because all of a sudden, this team looked like a mess week one. The special teams issues, the offense for really 5 weeks, just looking very, influid, just messy. Nothing was easy. The defense had some of those busts and all that. And the thing that jumps out to me each week I cover them is every time there's a clear issue one week, it gets addressed. And that sounds so obvious, but man, we've all covered a lot of teams where that is not the
Yes.
case. And
I think we're going to talk about one a little bit later.
Exactly. Or we can dive into this, but the second half number stuff with LSU is bonkers, where they're outscoring Power 5 opponents by 65 in second halves. And a lot of that is, Kelly talks about how well conditioned they are and how they can exert themselves. True, a little bit, but also that's coaching adjustments. That's, hey, this isn't working. Here's what they're doing. Let's fix it. And I think the thing that highlights this completely is Jaden Daniels. Listen, if people that were criticizing him were not wrong, the offense was limited for the first 5 or 6 games. And then all of a sudden, against Florida, he just became a different quarterback. He suddenly was throwing the ball confidently. He was reading defenses and decisively putting balls up the one-on-ones, and they were winning them. And then Saturday, he was running the show. It was a heavy RPO-based scheme that was pretty much entirely in his hands, whether hand it off, run it himself, or pass it. And he put on a show. Basically all 500 yards of offense were kind of his choices. So all of a sudden, this is a different football team, because Jaden Daniels went from below average, I'd say, to, again, not great defenses, but this version of him is a star. So yeah, I think you have to give credit. And yeah, there's other things, I think they weren't as bad as the Florida State game as they looked, or things like that. But still, man, this is suddenly a team that knows who it is. They're not top 8. They're not great, but they know how they're going to win football games, and they can beat Arkansas and A&M without a doubt.
Yeah, and I think for the whole season, when people ask me about LSU, I'm like, well, they got the bodies, but they just can't score, and that's a problem.
Exactly.
And then they put up 45 on Florida, and I'm like, well, but Florida hadn't been able to stop anybody all year. And it's kind of but Ole Miss is a very good defense.
Yep.
And they really, 42-3 over the last 3 quarters. To do that to a team of Ole Miss's caliber, I don't think Ole Miss is a top 10 team. I thought they were playing above their weight class, but they're probably a borderline top 15, 20 team if you, if you played it out, at least from Vegas's perspective, or from, how good teams actually are. Relative to the rankings as a snapshot in time. And to dominate a team like that is really impressive. And, I think this is what I wrote about this morning at The Athletic as well. But when you pay a coach $100 million, like
Yeah.
LSU elected to do, to pull Brian Kelly away from Notre Dame, this is what you pay for.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure how many coaches would be able to, one, pull the talent that they got from the portal, for one,
Yeah.
to fix a lot of the issues. Obviously, Jaden Daniels is the headliner there, but plenty of other pieces as well, to fill in some of the losses that they lost to the portal, and then have this kind of improvement, like you said, fixing stuff from week to week. It is a great coaching job, and I think other guys. I mean, we'll talk about South Carolina, Shane Beamer a little bit later. Obviously, Josh Heupel in Tennessee will be in the mix as well. There's been a lot of great coaching jobs in the SEC this year.
Absolutely.
And we'll see where LSU ends up at the finish line. There's a lot of games left to be played still. But man, he's done one of he's certainly got a case for coach of the year. I don't think he'll win it.
No.
But man, this is a really impressive stuff here, because I really thought this is going to be an average LSU team, and they're not, and they look a lot better than what we saw against Florida State.
And also, there's something to your point about like the portal, and I mentioned this in the piece. I mean, there's like an element of the things that are winning them a lot of these games. Sure, some of them are already there. Your Keyshawn Booties, your Brian Tom, all these guys, but BJ Ojolari. But a lot of what really won Saturday, for example, was the transfers and the freshmen. And that is something that if you're an LSU fan, like you got to really point to and be optimistic about, because it's like Joe Fouché was the guy who got that game sealing interception, or Greg Brooks is playing great. Jaden Daniels has been dominating, quite frankly. And then the freshmen right now are kind of mind-boggling. Like, we've all seen good freshman classes in our time, but and I don't know if like in 3 years this will be the best class, but Harold Perkins is already like, I mean, he's not just good, he is one of the best linebackers in the country right now. I mean, he's a freak. Lane Kiffin even said, like, hey, what changed in the game? And he's like, oh, they played Harold Perkins more. Will Campbell and Emory Jones are two true freshmen who are not just like playing offensive tackle in the SEC. They were some of the highest graded offensive tackles in the country, you know. And LSU's O-line looked like a mess week one, and then they put Jones in, and all of a sudden it's now an above average area of this team. And then Mason Taylor had to keep the game leading touchdown at tight end, who's a true freshman, son of Jason Taylor. Like, the new pieces that are kind of Kelly are the things that are the most optimistic right now. And I think that's a good sign. And yeah, the thing you and I have both kind of kept repeating is like, even after the Tennessee loss, it's like they are who they are. I don't think this changed what I think of them, because they will probably still lose one, or they might lose to Arkansas, but it's just the idea of how does it look. That's what this year's really about, is how does 8-4, 7-5 look when you get there. And right now it looks like a team that's getting better, looks like a team that, as corny as this is, keeps fighting and finding ways to will themselves into games. The roster's not there yet, but you have a lot of optimism that, like, come 2023 or 24, this should be a real contender.
I think it's just very interesting, because I felt like, okay, they're kind of on cruise control, and I did think Tennessee was going to roll them, maybe not as badly as they did, but I was like, I think Tennessee's going to expose them. Tennessee's, a team that I thought was really good coming into the season, and that was a pretty ugly game, but we saw Brian Kelly after the game go back to that game and say, well, we were closer. Well, the thing I thought was interesting, actually, Brody, is he's kind of swallowing his words as they're starting to spill out. And he was kind of thinking about, well, should I say this? Should I not say this? Or how should I phrase this? And he basically said, we were closer than it looked against Tennessee. One, as somebody who was there, do you buy that a lot of the lopsided scores because of the fourth down stuff? And two, what do you make of him sort of being indecisive about whether or not to go there?
I think I know what that was. I think I'm 80% sure, like, just seeing his body language in that moment, it was, do I basically tell you guys that you guys are reactionary, like, not know what you're talking about? Like, people, it kind of felt like he was being like, do I really just, like, say? And I know exactly what he's saying here. And by the way, he was the first to say, like, Tennessee was better. Like, that's, but I actually understand exactly what he means in two parts. One, that game just got off the rails quickly, right? It was bizarre special teams errors, like 2 of them, and it was 13-0 within 5 minutes. And like, Tennessee's going to win that game either way, I believe. But that data point immediately gets skewed because everything else that happens in that game is now, as you know, a result of you are playing from 2 scores behind.
Yeah, you're chasing points.
Yes. So one, that's it. And two, Kelly went for it on every single fourth down in the first half. Some of them like 4th and 8, and not even like, he was very aggressive with it. And I think his point that he was really trying to say about that game was like, yes, they were going to lose that game anyway, but they were not playing. They could have played a version of that game where you manage it, where you lose by 10 because you're playing smart football, but they knew that version wouldn't win the game. And they were, in his point was, and I think he said this in the quote, was like, the LSU was playing to find a way to win. So in turn, when you don't get that fourth down, now it's 20-3 or whatever. And I think he's right about that. Like, I think that's a fair point. Tennessee is at least 10 points better than LSU. Like, that is a fact. And I don't think he was saying it wasn't. He was just saying, like, everyone was in sky is falling mode after that game because it was literally the worst FBS loss of Brian Kelly's career. And he's like, that isn't quite the case. And I think he's right, because then you see the next 2 weeks, it's a good team. Not a great team, but it's a good team.
Mm-hmm. Well, Brody, speaking of $100 million and falling skies,
that's a segue.
Let's hit on Texas A&M, where I'm not sure the sky is darker than just about anywhere. They're kind of back in no man's land, because, as we've said, you're underneath this insane contract that you gave Jimbo Fisher, and then double down when Ed Orgeron's on the hot seat. You're kind of wondering, because the funniest part of the Jimbo Fisher contract, in which right now it would cost A&M a shade under $86 million to fire him. The funniest part about that is if Jimbo Fisher wanted to go coach the Dallas Cowboys or the LSU Tigers or the Ohio Bobcats tomorrow, it would cost him $0 to do so. Yeah. That is the funniest part of the contract. But A&M gives him the extension, a raise, turns their $75 million man into their $95 million man. And this situation that they're currently in now is why you don't do those kinds of things. I've said this over and over again for the last decade. Agents versus athletic directors is the most lopsided rivalry in college sports. Yeah. And they're taking a huge L right now. And I think the one thing that I think gets lost in the Jimbo Fisher discussion is not, well, this buyout prevents you from firing him. What that buyout does is gives you no leverage at all to control your head coach, because obviously Jimbo Fisher, as many head coaches are, is a headstrong guy. But we've seen in the past that when your head coach is on the hot seat and is sort of trying to save his job, the AD can go down there and say, hey, we're going to make these changes, or we're going to make a change and it's going to be you.
Yep.
I am of the mind, I felt this all season. I felt it Saturday night. I think A&M is one really good OC hire away from being a juggernaut. I truly believe that. I think the nuts and bolts of the program are fine. The defense is great. The talent is there. The quarterbacks could be better, but I think the quarterbacks are limited by the system that is extremely complex and very hard to learn. And I don't think Jimbo Fisher's going to do that. I think he might bring in somebody to offer some new ideas, but he's not going to give up play calling. They're not going to have this offensive overhaul. And now you're kind of stuck. And so for as much as people talk about the buyout, you can't fire him and all that stuff, it not only prevents you from firing him, it prevents you from trying to go over his head to make some changes, because he is the most powerful guy on campus. Brody, when you look at A&M, I mean, this is year 5. How did we get here? What is, like, we're sitting here and A&M is careening for what may be the worst season under Jimbo Fisher, and a season that they started in the top 10, just outside the top 5.
Yeah, and like the thing I want to know is, like, because I don't think many people have great insight into Jimbo. Like, he's so public and like so talkative, but I don't think there's that great insight into him. And I'm curious, you've covered him. I'm curious your opinion. Like,
I did do a deep profile on him for Dave Campbell's Texas football cover story. I can get into that in a little bit, but go on.
Absolutely. Like, I want to know, like, is he embarrassed, or is he like, you guys don't get it? Like, that's what maybe that's the answer to like what happens these next few years. Because if there's the version of him that is like, I can't believe this is happening, then yeah, man, like, you make some changes, and there is no reason next year's team that per capita will probably be like a top 2 or 3 team in the country in talent, right? Like, they should be. There's no reason they can't be an 11-win team next year. But I've also heard so many things from people who've covered him that are like to your point, he is so headstrong. he is not going to change this stuff. Also, it's probably unfair to act like everything wrong with this team is play calling, but it's a big chunk. And it's like
I think it's bigger than that. I think it's scheme more than play calling. I don't think
that's what I meant to say. Sorry.
Yeah, the play calling. I do think it is scheme. I honestly do.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
I think I'm not saying they should run the Baylor offense, but there's a reason why 13 something teams do, and it doesn't have to be that, but something that is more effective. Ultimately.
And I always, my favorite example of your great point about like, it's about the leverage, right? But it's also about these headstrong coaches. They are not normal. You do not get there by being normal. And I always go back to the example of, I think it was 16, the year Les Miles got fired, I believe. And the entire offseason was the whole narrative was Joe Oliva and everyone's pressuring him. Like, you have to spread this ball out. You got to pass more. You have to get closer to 50-50. It was the whole thing. And I think they're at Wisconsin that year in Lambeau. And first play of the game, Les Miles calls a toss. And by the way, the whole year, like Les Miles, like, yep, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. First play, toss dive. And then he looks up at the press box, if I recall that story correctly, like at the Joe Oliva. Like, these guys don't like being told what to do. And they don't like anyone thinking they know better. And this is going to be the story of Jimbo Fisher, because he is a good enough football coach, a smart enough human to make these pivots and win a title or something. But he's also a headstrong dude, and we're going to find out. And you're right. Like, I don't think the answer is Jimbo Fisher, or just realistically, I should say, is Jimbo Fisher just like hands the keys to like Kendall Bryant or whatever, like, but the best comp, and I'm sorry to keep making everything LSU, and I've said this on the show like 3 times already, I apologize, but it's the Joe Brady thing. They loved Steve Ensminger. They loved him as a play caller, but they needed Joe Brady to come in and be the idea guy, the scheme guy. He brought in the ideas. It was still Steve Ensminger's show, and Jimbo would be a heightened version of that. But like, at least do that. But I know it's not that simple, but I think there's something there.
Well, I think where you're at with A&M is you're stuck right now. So you've got 3 paths forward, right? One is a pipe dream, which is somebody cuts an $86 million check to fire him at the end of the year, which I actually don't think that's a good idea, because I don't even think it's worth having the conversation, because it's not going to happen. But also, I'm a big, well, who are you going to get guy? And there's not going to be a lot of guys, even in this place where USC is pulling Lincoln Riley and LSU is pulling Brian Kelly. Listen, I still think Jimbo Fisher is probably one of the 5 to 6, 7 best coaches in the sport.
Top 10 at least, yeah.
Yeah, and I think you can fix this with him. And
you can't roll out, like, the infrastructure is the infrastructure he built. And that talent's unreal. Yes. You can't ignore it. Yeah.
They're still sitting there at number 4 in 24/7 talent composite. They're probably going to be rising. Well, we'll see if they can keep going. We'll talk recruiting in a second. But so I think you got to stick with Jimbo. I don't think you even have that conversation, but it's not even pointless. $86 million is a lot. So you're
they got billionaire money. Like,
yeah, but still,
I'm not saying they will, but like 86 mil to a billionaire.
If there was a school that would do it, it's LSU. But I mean, it's A&M, but I don't think they're going to. Anyway,
I'm with you.
A&M or Texas anyway. But anyway, so then you have, okay, well, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. We're going to keep banging our head against the wall, which I think is what's going to keep happening at A&M. And I feel bad for A&M fans, because I think that's the most likely scenario. Or you bring in somebody to quote unquote offer influence, the Joe Brady path, or you hand over the offense entirely. If it's me, I'm handing over the offense entirely, and I'm taking Jimbo, and I'm saying, Jimbo, you're really good at running a program. Be the CEO, recruit your butt off, keep building this thing, keep doing this thing, but hand off the offense to somebody else. He's not going to do it, but that's what I think would help this program in the biggest way. And he said in the middle of the season, I believe the FWA's beat writer of the year, if I recall, Brett Zwerneman, asked him if you felt like, would you hand over play calling or hand over the offense? And he said, well, if I felt like that was the best thing for us to win, yes, I would. Well,
great politician answer.
That's a large caveat, because certainly he's going to have a divergent opinion from a lot of other people. But I think this offense is outdated. I think the offense is not working. This is a results business. How much more do you need to see? I dropped this in my SEC column this morning from the ESPN Stats and Info department. But A&M has now failed to score more than 24 points in 9 consecutive games. The only 2 other
How is that possible?
Exactly. Against FBS opponents. And the only other 2 programs with that streaks that are longer are two programs that you do not want to find yourself in company with, and that is Colorado and Rutgers. That is
Side note, A&M hasn't even played like the great defenses in the SEC.
no,
Like,
they have not.
no.
And that those are bedfellows you do not want to keep in any way, especially this Colorado team and Rutgers in general. So, I just don't know how much more you need to see. And the problem is that I don't think there's anything you can do about it because you've made this insane contract. And these are becoming more and more. I mean, we see the Mel Tucker deal. Obviously, that one stands out as another one's fully guaranteed. Stu Mandel wrote over the weekend. Another school that is coming to the SEC in Brent Venables gave him a fully guaranteed deal.
Did they?
Like,
wow.
You don't have to do this.
You really don't. You're
really
Oklahoma.
Don't
People want to go there. People want it.
You do not have to do this. And this is why you don't do it. Because when everybody's wrapped up in the hire, like, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to be competing for playoff spots, national championships in no time. And then when you don't, you leave yourself with no options. And that's where A&M is right now.
You know what's really going on there, right, though, is like we all say, like, how dumb are you for doing this? But it doesn't matter to the athletic director. Their job is just to get the guy. And if the coach doesn't work anyway, they're screwed anyway. You know what I mean? So it's like Scott Woodward made that deal. First off, he left for LSU. So it's like, not my problem. But two, it's just like, it's not the presidents and the board need to be the ones arguing this. Because like the AD, it's like, yeah, I want to make this deal because it's either going to work or it isn't. And either way, it's a win or a loss for me. So I don't need to make a smart business deal. Now, the other thing is like, I think the best move here is to appeal to ego with Jimbo, because if that's how we think he operates, and say like, I think if he did like just remove his ego and hand it over to somebody and it works, somebody needs to appeal to him that would make him look better. People would write the most glowing features you've ever read, and everyone would talk about how smart and savvy and selfless that was to finally do this, and then you go win the SEC or something. Like, they need to appeal. It's like the thing I always say is like, if I'm a basketball coach, I'd be appealing that if you pass more, you'll get better looks and you'll score more. Like, and it's like being selfless will help you get more acclaim because you will be in championships and all that shit. And it's like, yeah, I think that's got to be the appeal to Jimbo is like, if you do this, you will look bad. So I don't know. That sounds obvious.
I think that's a good play. I think it's true. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you're trying to win. And I get maybe if you're Jimbo, you want to win in a certain way and run your program in a certain way, but you're not doing that. A&M is careening toward, at best, probably a 7-5 season, and maybe 6-6.
Yep.
And you got to I think they have to beat Florida basically to get in a bowl game.
Yep.
Like, that's not a guarantee. Anthony Richardson seems like a ticking time bomb that can beat just about anybody when he gets hot on a given day. So like. And especially considering, the way that their offense is playing, and even against Florida, you're probably gonna have some issues putting up a ton of points. So it's just it's a weird spot that they find themselves in, and I don't know. I think your play is probably the play that you have to do, but there have to be some hard conversations, and I feel like again, this is about leverage, and that is what you don't have. And, I would say that schools should prevent themselves from giving these crazy fully guaranteed contracts. But the problem is that you always want to hire that guy. And now when Brent Venables has one and Mel Tucker has one and Jimbo Fisher has one, and you have a great candidate that you really want this candidate. And he says, well, here's what it's going to take to get me. I want all my money fully guaranteed. Well, it's going to work out great, Brody. So why not fully guarantee the contract, right?
Now the market is screwed forever.
Yes. Yeah. And so I would say schools shouldn't do this, but now that the precedent is set, and guys like Brent Venables, who have never been a head coach before, he's got a fully guaranteed contract. Well, why can't I get one, Brody?
Like when you lay it out like this, it's just so stupid.
Athletic directors versus agents, Brody. It's the FCS FBS rivalry.
It's the Generals versus the
it really is
Globetrotters.
The Globetrotters. It really is, and it's funny, but I feel bad for A&M fans because they're in this spot, and that's where we're at. Do we have? And now, of course, looking to the future, which is where the brightest spot for A&M is because of their recruiting. It's going to get harder to recruit.
Yep.
when you're losing and you're selling this dream that is crumbling in front of you. And in the transfer portal era, you got to keep the Evan Stewarts, the Walter Nolans, these
Good
big
point.
dudes that you brought in. When Brody, I'm told that there might be some tampering that happens. You
No,
think surely not,
get out
but
of here.
you think maybe Walter Nolan or people close to Walter Nolan or Evan Stewart or people close to Evan Stewart. How many people that Evan Stewart is close to you think have gotten texts during A&M games this year that says, "Hey, you want to be stuck in that for the next 4 years? Or you want to come somewhere where you have hope of having a 1,000-yard season?"
Yep.
That's the reality of what's going to happen, and I think that in the portal era, that becomes a lot more attractive. And so, man, holding that together is going to be even more and more difficult the more and more you keep banging your head against the wall and you keep trying to do these things that are not working.
Yeah.
I don't know how much more you need to see. Like I just, at some point you got to make changes.
No, it's true. And it's a great point about the portal area because it's like 3 years ago, it's like, yeah, like some guys might want to transfer, but is it really worth losing that time or whatever? Now it's like Alabama can just immediately say, hey, if you put Evan Stewart on this Alabama team, they
Oh
are
my gosh.
they are the number one team. Like it
Evan
changes
Stewart's
that
the piece
quickly.
that A&M that Alabama's missing right now. That's a good point. I
Exactly.
hadn't even thought about
Like
that. Yeah.
it's right there, and it's just if you are a 19-year-old kid. By the way, I'm not even saying that's a immature decision. No, it just makes sense. It is a
Yeah.
smarter business decision, and I think that's almost like this is now completely irresponsible, like just speculate on my part. But it's like I almost wonder in the portal and the NIL era of like get that money going to A&M, you know, and then you can be like, hey, if it's not working out, I can just go there. And I know there's contracts and like situations of like you might, if you leave, what changes, but still, it's like, hey, but I go back and forth. I'm like the reasons people are going to A&M. I know it's not just NIL and all that, but it's like that part's not changing. Like they are still going to be able to offer good deals and things like that. So they'll probably still do okay. And you always hear like the most common thing you and I probably both get told by every like recruiting staff or ever is like on like that year's wins and losses don't really affect recruiting as much as people think.
Yeah.
But this isn't about this year. It's about year 5 of I don't know if I'm a receiver, if I'm going to get developed for the pros. If I'm a quarterback, it looks like my stock's going to go down by going to A&M, all that stuff. So like I go back and forth on it. But yeah, man, that is the thing. It's not about how good they are this year. It's if he loses the recruiting momentum, everything's off the table.
Yeah. And this week they got a chance. This can really go two ways again.
I kind of think they win this week.
I don't. I really don't. I think you can. If you win this, it doesn't.
Play Ole Miss for our listeners.
Yes, sure. Ole Miss. They'll host Ole Miss.
Yeah.
So there's two scenarios here, Brody. You can beat Ole Miss and you can shut people up for a little bit. But man, if you get smacked this week on front of your home crowd, the Boo Birds. Listen, A&M doesn't boo; they hiss. So maybe there's just a lot of hissing going on. Yeah. I did say, by the way, I was mentioning I tweeted this Saturday night. I don't spend a ton of time around A&M as much as I used to in terms of like physically being in College Station. But I said it's always you feel like A&M is normal until a ball carrier rolls out of bounds into like 8 guys carrying swords on the sidelines, and that's A&M for you. But anyway, if you get smacked in that game and it's the fourth quarter and you're down 17, 20 points, oh man.
Who knows what those guys with swords are going to do,
Exactly. The thing you don't want to do, even in 2022, is upset somebody carrying a sword. So
that's one of my 6 rules. Yeah.
That's a good rule to have. So we'll see. I just, man.
That game's going to be fascinating because like,
it is.
I've learned that we're just wrong about something where every week I'm like, yeah, but A&M's got the bodies in the box to like stop a run game. And it's like, no, if you look at the run defense numbers, they're pretty bad. Like South Carolina ran at will against them. They're like 89th in rushing success rate defensively. Like they're not actually good there. So, I mean, you're right. Ole Miss might, but then my brain's like, I could see a scenario where like Ole Miss tries to run in the box in the A&M. So I'm literally just Sisyphus, up the.
Yeah.
But I kind of weirdly like A&M in this spot, even
A&M
though
2.5-point underdog in that game.
So yeah, it's just like home. I don't know, man. I think that LSU game might have just showed us a lot of like Ole Miss is a good, not great team. It's like that. I kind of view this game as like a pick 'em deep down. But what do I know?
We'll find out. Well, Brody, I tell you who is living well and does not have a fully guaranteed contract, although maybe he will soon.
Yeah, maybe in 2 months.
Yeah. Shane Beamer and the South Carolina Gamecocks are sitting pretty at 5-2, and they are standing alone in third place in the SEC East. Tied with Kentucky in the for third in the SEC East. This was not I think something that a lot of people saw. Is South Carolina being at this point ahead of Florida, tied with Kentucky. I think people there's a lack of respect, I feel like, for South Carolina, even with the talent they brought in the portal. And we saw a spicy Shane Beamer after the game. Very interesting that, he mentioned that a month ago people had asked him, one reporter had asked him if he saw any quit in his team. And his response was, that looked like any quit out there. And they did not. They had not quit. They have now won 4 in a row. I believe Shane Beamer for the first time since 2013. They beat Kentucky without Will Levis, but still, a win is a win. And I think South Carolina is now operating in this territory, Brody, where they're good enough to beat you, but it still causes an existential crisis for programs that lose to them because they're like, how did we lose to South Carolina?
It's like the old Gary Pinkel, Missouri zone.
Yes, a little bit of that. Where they're sitting there and everybody in the SEC, except for like the Missouri and the Vanderbilts and all that, will say, oh, we got South Carolina. We'll beat them, obviously. Yep. And then, no, you won't. And I also think, too, Williams-Brice Stadium was hopping for that A&M game.
That place is going, man. That place is as good as most.
It is about as good as just about anywhere in the SEC. Yeah. I think, you have that sort of upper tier of like when they're really going, like the Kyle Fields, the Neylands, Death Valleys, all that stuff. I think Williams-Brice is just like right below that. It's a really, really good atmosphere.
I was almost a Gamecock. Did you know that?
I did not know that, Brody.
It was between IU and South Carolina, man. I could have been SEC before I even came on this show.
Well, I almost went to Northwestern or Syracuse, but I value my core body temperature.
So you really sorry, I know our producer's like, I hate you, but you really just chose between all 3 of the like most bratty journalism schools. Wow, what a legend.
Yes, I did, and Arkansas, but Arkansas did not get a lot of serious consideration. But yes, I went to Missouri, and that was as cold. I will never live further north than that ever. That took it out of me. I can't do it. Right. My sophomore year, we got like 18 inches of snow, and I said, never again. This is terrible. I can't do cold. So anyway, I think ultimately the South Carolina team right now is playing good football. They're playing certainly opportunistic against A&M. Some of that was A&M mistakes. If you have not seen the clip of I want to call it an interception by A&M center who snapped the ball off of Haynes King's knee.
I've never seen a ball bounce off somebody like that.
I've never seen that. It's like a
trampoline.
A tip drill interception for a defensive lineman off of the snap. That's a new one for me. I have not seen that on the football field. Incredible. But they returned the opening kick. Thanks to some poor tackling by A&M. The effort was not quite there. But I'm happy for Shane Beamer in South Carolina because ultimately, for so many coaches in this sport, Brody, it feels like winning is just a relief and losing is like we gotta like sacrifice somebody at the altar or something like that. He seems to actually enjoy winning.
Yeah.
And there's the number of coaches who want to have fun. I mean, 2 weeks ago, he puts the sunglasses on and throws some shade at Mark Stoops in the locker room. People make fun of him for the being demonstrative on the sideline when his team is losing. Those kind of things. Like this stuff means a lot to him, and he is very emotional and enjoys winning. I like that. I think we should have Bring back the joy in winning, Brody. And South Carolina, when they win, seems to have a lot of joy, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I think we talked about this before, but it's like, and it just does. There are so many coaches that feels like a gimmick when they're doing all that stuff. And him, I don't think it's gimmicky because he's being so like vulnerably corny about it sometimes in the best way. Like he really believes it. And to your point about like that brutal zone, well, good for them zone, to be clear, of like they can beat anyone, but it's a bad loss. I think it has to do with like, when for football fans and like I think us too, you need something to like cling on to with a team, like to understand them. You know, it's like, shoot, even if like they had Debo Samuel right back, like you'd be like, okay, it's the Debo Samuel team. Like it makes sense. There is nothing to cling on to about why South Carolina is winning these games and it's good. So your brain can't comprehend it. You're just like, what? And I mean, shoot, even if you like look at inside of these games, it's like, wait, what did they do? First, I mean, their special teams is kind of part of the answer. They are number 2 in special teams SP plus. Like, I mean, they opened the game with what's that?
Shout out to Beamer Ball.
Absolutely, real life Beamer Ball is back. They opened the game with the kickoff return, and I believe they also had a fumble. They forced a fumble on a punt return. Like their special teams are actually winning them games, but they're just weird because it's the offense isn't that good, but it's definitely not bad. The defense isn't that good. And there's got to be something so frustrating about playing them because they let like they're 101st in success rate defensively, right? Like they let teams move the ball at will, but teams don't really score on them. And maybe that's a lot of that has to do with field position, the special team stuff we're talking about, where it's like they know how to manage football games. Quite frankly, it's like they put you in bad field position. They kind of let you drive, but eventually you'll make a mistake, as we saw A&M do like 3 times. And it's like, that's got to be so frustrating to a program to lose to because it's like, what are they good at? And it's like they're good at football, but not anything special. Man, but that's coaching, and that's what has to have you excited because he is a great recruiter, and he does have a buzz going. And it's like he can now point to, we're winning games, we're not even that talented. And all of a sudden, like, I don't think South Carolina's ever going to have a top 5 class, but I can't wait to see how good of classes he can get. Like, what if he does get a top 10 class? Like, that's going to keep growing, man. And that's so cool because that's fun for college football.
He does have a magnetism about him. And, Brody, I will say, South Carolina, 20th in 24/7 Sports Talent Composite. 19th, Tennessee, by the way. Shout out to Josh Heupel. I think tells you a bit about what Tennessee's doing right now.
They have the number 15 class in the country right now.
Yes. So there's a magnetism about him, and I think South Carolina certainly has a lot of talent. But not only in recruiting, as you look at the road ahead for the South Carolina team, sitting at 5 wins, they have to split Missouri and Vanderbilt. They've Vanderbilt on the road to get to 6. I generally think they'll win both of those, but we'll see.
They've at least a 66% chance to win both. Yeah.
They go to the Swamp, which will be interesting. I thought they were going to get Dan Mullen fired the night of last year, and they just absolutely punked Florida. They did not, but that was certainly kind of the beginning of the end there, where it was looking up and saying, what is wrong with Florida? So that'll be an interesting game. We'll see there.
That's a literal toss-up, right? Like,
going to the Swamp will be tough. And then, Brody, they get a chance to close their season and just absolutely be a spoiler wrecking ball if they can do it. They get to host Tennessee, which would be a very dangerous game for Tennessee. Tennessee embarrassed them last year in Knoxville. I think that was like 35-0 in the second quarter or something along those lines. But you get them at home, and then you go to Clemson. Clemson, mortal this year. Very good, improved, but they can lose to some teams.
Oh, yeah.
So I think
they're beating Clemson. I'm calling it now, baby.
The idea that South Carolina can be sitting there with 6 wins, a bowl assured, and go into the last 2 games of the season with a ton of house money and trying to ruin Tennessee's dream season and try to knock Clemson out of the playoff. And I don't particularly want to see Clemson in the playoff. I think they would get exposed by some really good teams.
I'm with you.
So I think South Carolina, for a bit there, would probably be America's team playing Clemson unless Clemson looks like a whole different team. That would be – man, those are going to be 2 very, very interesting games to close the season. And I don't know that I bet on them to win either of those, but I think they might scare one or both of those.
I'm ready to do it, man. Like, I mean, I bet that Clemson spread's like 17. Like, first off, probably give me that. But like, if you even look at Bill Connolly's like his projections, like they're just as likely to win 8 games as they are 7, and they're just as likely to win 9 games as they are 6. Like, it's all in front of them,
No,
man. Like they can do some stuff. So it's awesome, man. This is just, I think we talked last week about like, what?
no, go
Sorry,
ahead.
I actually just pressed our link and started hearing my own voice. That was awful. But like SEC's just in such, sorry, I lost my train of thought. But the SEC's just in such a great spot of just like everybody feels like they, except A&M, have positive momentum right now, man. Like South Carolina being this good, Tennessee being this good, it's just really awesome. And like I think we had the which is better, the East or the West conversation last week, and I still say the West. But God, the East it's a different East, and like I want to watch East games now. I haven't wanted to watch East games last few years at all.
Well, Missouri and Vanderbilt are kind of weighing down the like, and Auburn. For as much as we talk about Auburn has looked mostly competent,
Yeah,
although just not threatening or good,
it's
but
the
like
perfect way to put it. Yeah.
not totally like fire sale disaster just yet. It's just like they don't scare anyone, which is kind of crazy for an Auburn team to not scare anyone, but that's kind of where they're at. But we'll, that I South Carolina is just fun right now, and I think that there is a belief there, and I think that there is a just generally good vibes coming from South Carolina. And so props to Shane Beamer. This is what you hire Shane Beamer for as well. Brody, the alcohol content of the SEC this week is rising. With we have the cocktail party and the beer barrel in the same week. Am I crazy? Didn't the cocktail party used to be a little bit earlier?
I always remember it being.
I made this up.
I don't remember it always being in the day, but I feel like being 2:30 makes sense. Oh, you're saying earlier in the season. I'm sorry.
I don't remember the beer barrel and the cocktail party being on the same weekend. Maybe Kentucky got moved up. I think that's because Tennessee moved up Kentucky and Georgia. Maybe that's what it is. They swapped those two games. Either way, two pretty interesting games. I guess we should start with Tennessee. We haven't hit on them and Kentucky this week. Boy, this is
my Super Bowl. I'm so excited.
This is a dangerous matchup for Tennessee because you're playing with house money at this point of Tennessee. And Tennessee, they've played so few games over the last decade where you have almost nothing to gain and you have everything to lose. Yep. That has not been the space where Tennessee has operated. And they have handled big moments really well this season. Florida week, Alabama week. They played two really, really good games in those spots. The team clearly was focused and played well. But Kentucky is a tough matchup for them for a couple reasons. One, the biggest thing, Tennessee's biggest weakness is their corners, right? Kentucky, Berrien Brown, Tavion Robinson, those two are better than anybody that Bama throws out there at receiver.
It's true.
They're fast, and they can beat you over the top. And Will Levis is a guy that can get it there. People can criticize Will Levis all they want, but he torched Tennessee last year. And he's got the pieces to do it again. Then on top of that, you have the running game. Tennessee has really defended the run very, very well. I'd have to see where their updated numbers are after the UT Martin game, but they were top 10 last week in defensive yards per carry. Yep. So they've really defended the run well. So that's going to be a tough matchup for Chris Rodriguez back there, Cavassier Smoke, all that stuff. But, Brody, and part of this is big plays. But, Brody, how many offensive snaps do you think Tennessee ran against Kentucky last year?
I don't even know where to guess. Like, are you saying it's a lot or a little? I have no idea. I'll let you take it.
47 offensive snaps last year.
That's what they do, baby.
Tennessee has run about 70 to 75 every game this year. Kentucky's going to do the same thing this year.
They mangle games, man. It's what they do.
Get it ugly, keep you off the field because Tennessee's going to be able to score on Kentucky. Kentucky has a good defense, but Tennessee's going to be able to score. Well, limit possessions, ugly the game up, slow it down, and you could be in the game late. Kentucky's matches up really well with Tennessee. I think Tennessee wins this game, but I think Kentucky is in it late because of all those reasons. Yeah. I think they can run the ball a little bit, enough to soften the box, or enough to make Tennessee load the box a little bit more. And then Tavion Robinson and Berrien Brown those two are really, really good. So you throw those two guys in there, Will Levis get them the ball. This is Tennessee's going to have to bring their hard hat to work because this is going to be a rough matchup. Because I think at the end of the day, you get up for Florida, you get up for Alabama. I'm not sure that Tennessee has the same level of we got to do this with Kentucky.
It's just hard to do it that many times. Yeah.
Tennessee has owned Kentucky in this series, and I think that it's easy to sort of say, well, we can just do it again, and they might. But I don't know that I buy into the idea that Tennessee is going to roll this Kentucky team because they
and
can
you got Georgia,
slow it down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Georgia looming as well. So this is just a classic trap game scenario. Tennessee, I think Tennessee survives this, but man, if they lose, I will not be surprised because Kentucky does all the things that will allow them to beat this Tennessee team.
It's true. I mean, like, shoot, I have my like nerdy Excel sheet of all the data and all that matching up. And it's like so cool though, because like everything you laid out about the matchup, it's so beautiful because every chart is like everything that Tennessee is dark green, Tennessee's dark green at defending, or vice versa. And everything that's red because they're bad at, Kentucky's also bad at that. Or like it's just a beautiful matchup of like Tennessee is the 6th most efficient offense, just success rate, not opponent adjusted, like in the country. Kentucky is number 6 at defense, like efficiency. Like it's beautiful. I can't wait. And it's like, what have we been talking about? I think since like week 1 of this show, of this season, of just like, there's these 2 parallel paths of being good, right? And it's are you just like the efficient, methodical, like you just do your job per play, or are you the like, I know how to mangle games and be good, like South Carolina, Kentucky, of like just confine it to what I want it to be. And you are literally seeing, and it's a bummer. It is such a bummer that UK lost Levis for that South Carolina game, because this game could have been like a massive deal. It could. Yeah. It's juicy for us, but it doesn't.
2 top 20 teams, but it could have been 2 top 15, borderline top 10 teams. Yeah,
it would have felt more symbolic of like the battle to be that other team in the East or whatever. But still, it's a great game, and it is that parallel matchup of Tennessee, Kentucky. They do these 2 different things that are like, but they're both so darn good at it. And I just always am gonna want Mark Stoops in a game where he's this big of an underdog. It's like a 14-point dog, and like I think it's down to 13 now, but like. I love Kentucky to make this close. At the end of the day, I do probably, there's just that oomph that Tennessee has with Hendon Hooker, that trust that like they are going to kind of just make that play in crunch time more than, even though I love Levis, that offense doesn't have that same I'm going to make a play oomph as best as I can describe it. Great podcasting. So yeah, I think it's going to be a 1-score game though. I think I'll take Tennessee, but give me those points if I'm. I think before we get to our betting segment, give me those points.
What do we make of the cocktail party? Do we think Florida can make this interesting?
I do.
I believe it was 22-point line, something along those lines.
Yep. I do. I think
I don't know, man. Georgia's defense against Anthony Richardson. I think they can. I think they're going to be able to force him into just a nightmare ball game. I just don't. I think when you can limit him and keep him in the pocket because they have the athletes to do that. They don't have Nakobe Dean running sideline to sideline like he used to back there. But, man, I do think that they can – this feels like this could be like an 8 of 26 for 110 yards and 2 picks kind of game.
Yeah.
I think this could get ugly. I really think this could get ugly.
So I guess the better way to put this is like, no, I do not think Florida can like win this game. I don't think that. But like there's an element of like, okay – Florida's a mess right now, right? They have a lot of holes, a lot of things that are just systematically a little messed up right now. And like in a vacuum most years, though, this should be what? Like a 12, 13-point game? Is that more fair? Like it should at least be somewhere in that range. And I know they're both coming off buys, but I like Billy Napier to Florida coming off a bye here. Not to be great, but to fix some of those glaring issues, the tackling, the just general defensive scheme, all that stuff. Like I like them to come in with some more answers a little bit and just to look like a more complete team. Do I think they win or have them on the ropes in the 4th? No, but I think Florida can make this a watchable football game. Is that a better way to put it?
The problem that I think you might run into is the way I could see the first quarter and a half playing out is Georgia gets the ball, 10 plays, 81 yards, 6 minutes off the clock, touchdown. Florida goes 3 and out.
Yeah,
Georgia gets the ball, 9 plays, 74 yards, touchdown. Florida gets a couple first downs and punts, and then it's 11 plays, 77 yards, touchdown, and then it's 21-0, and there's a minute and a half left in the first quarter.
That's
or in
fair.
The second quarter. I think that feels like where this game is heading because regardless of what you see, I think Georgia's offense can really just control this ball game. And this is a team that in a lot of ways has been defined by its defense. But in this game, because they're not as explosive, but Florida has not shown an ability to stop anyone. Man, 8 yards to Brock Bowers, 12 yards to Darnell Washington, hands it off to McIntosh for 6 yards. I feel like it's going to be a lot of that, and I don't know that there's anything Florida can do about that. And that I think is going to be a problem for them, because I think it's going to be just a slow drip, 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 drip. And then if you give up the catastrophic play like we saw last year at the end of the first half, where Florida was making it interesting, and then they just imploded over the course of 2 minutes, then you're getting into real nasty territory. But I just think this feels like a game where it's going to be tough sledding for Florida. But we'll see. Maybe we get a special performance. But I think Georgia can be able to do what they did to Bo Nix to Anthony Richardson. Keep him reined in, make him throw the ball, but then their corners are really good. And I don't know that Florida has the receiver talent to get free to allow Anthony Richardson to make some plays. I think their tackling might be a little bit better than what we saw from LSU a couple weeks ago.
No, I think that's probably I think that is overall the exact right read on this. And I think overall you're probably right. The only thing I'm just interested by is Georgia, and this is not me saying Georgia might not be good, of course not, but Georgia hasn't played a single top 50 even offense since that Oregon game. And the weird thing with that Oregon game is Georgia demolished them. Do not twist this, but Oregon was able to move the ball, and then just Georgia kept forcing turnovers, and just Oregon couldn't get anything out of that. And again, Georgia's defense is amazing, but I'm just I am intrigued to see okay, but can Anthony Richardson maybe do some stuff, kind of like Bo Nix was able to move the ball before he kind of imploded. I'm just intrigued by it. Georgia should be fine, but I think that's the one thing I'm watching.
I don't know how much this I'll be watching. If this is on, I'm couching it again. I'm couching it again this weekend. And if I need to see the schedule.
How is this the 2:30 game? What are we doing?
I don't know. Well, it's the cocktail party at the end of the day.
I guess, but come on, get Kentucky, Tennessee. I mean, I'll enjoy a primetime game. It's my bye week. You were on the couch last week. I'm on the couch.
I'm on the couch again this week too.
Let's zoom over the couch, baby.
Yes. But we'll see. Brody, what did I when we were going to our pick segment? What did I say last week? If I lost Mississippi State plus 21.5, it would be because they scored 3 or 7 points, something along those lines.
Is this you basically trying to convince us that you weren't wrong in being wrong?
No.
I was wrong, but my analysis was...
Well, I did say it felt like a 31-13, a 31-17 type of game.
Your sentiment was correct.
I thought this Mississippi State offense would be good enough to beat, or at least get in the end zone before the last play against Alabama. I was wrong. Shout out to Mike Leach after the game. He said, in true Halloween spirit, if you want to scare his players, just hang up an Alabama jersey in their locker, and they will be terrified.
That's pretty good.
Mike Leach, after a bad loss, is usually one of the more entertaining Mike Leaches. There was a rant about he was worried about the evolution of hands in human existence.
Yes.
There's some dinosaur hand evolution he was referring to.
He's not embarrassed about losing. He's just yeah, man, here's what happened. I don't care.
Yeah, he's I think the funniest thing is the other side of the Mike Gundy "I'm a man, I'm 40" rant. Go Google what Mike Leach had to say that night, because he went off and it got totally overshadowed by Mike Gundy on that evening. It was an incredible. There's some colorful language in there, if I recall. Anyway, right now. But so Mississippi State, I knew if they didn't win this, it's because they couldn't score. But I thought they'd be able to score. But Nick Saban against air raid offenses has been ugly. But I thought Will Rogers' experience, Mississippi State, really talented receiver group, they did not get the job done. So that's a loss. Brody, who did you have? I forgot.
I had South Carolina.
Okay.
Plus 3.5.
I should have taken South Carolina just on the money line.
I'm a sharp. You're not. It's okay.
That A&M team going on the road to play a competent team and winning, that was never going to go well for them. But this week, Brody, I think we're thinking very similarly.
Yeah, and we've set the stage already for it.
We have set the stage, but Tennessee rolling this Kentucky team as presently constructed, I'm not sure I see it. We are both on Kentucky plus 14 this week on the road at Tennessee. I think this is a close game. The only way that I think Tennessee blows this up is if the turnovers get lopsided. And it's
if they are built in a way that it's if they are beating them, the margins are big. So that's the scary
Yeah.
part. It's like if
And I
they're
think
beating them, they win by 24.
and the road to I'd have to look at the numbers for Kentucky's offensive line. I haven't looked at them. If Tennessee does blow this up, it'll be because of their pass rush. Because
Good
Kentucky
call.
has been very, very susceptible. Ole Miss exposed it. Will Levis has taken a bunch of hits this year. And I think Tennessee can get to him. And if they blow this up, it's going to be because they pressured the heck out of Will Levis and they got him into some bad situations. So there's a road there where Tennessee, they slow down the run game. They pressure Will Levis into some mistakes, into some sack fumbles, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But I still think Kentucky can control this game, have enough big plays, limit Tennessee's offensive snaps, keep everything in front of them. They'll probably still give up a bomb or two. Jalen Hyatt's
Definitely.
really, really good. Brew McCoy is really, really good. I don't know that we'll see Cedric Tillman in this game. We'll see. They might be saving him up for Georgia and a tightrope ankle surgery. We'll see. But I will take Kentucky plus 14. Brody, you'll be with me, and you have an additional.
Wait, do you want to hear the Kentucky line stats just because they're mind-boggling? Like, I just want everyone to hear them.
Please do. What is their pressure rate, and what is what is that?
Okay, just to run through like the national ranks. Keep in mind, 131 teams, right? 129 in sack rate, 114th in pressure rate. Like,
there you go.
It's like 32% pressure rate.
If
like,
Tennessee blows this game up, it's going to be because of that. Because they lost Daria Rosenthal, and that was a huge loss for them. I forget, they lost one or two other offensive linemen. I forget. I wrote about this in preseason, but Tennessee leading the SEC in defensive pressure rate. So that's a bad matchup for Kentucky. So if this game goes sideways for Kentucky, it's going to be because of that Will Levis is just running for his life, which he may be. But when you can run the ball well, if they do that a little bit, you can buy some of that time. Brody, what's your other bonus pick?
Yeah, I mean, my official pick is Kentucky, so we're keeping score at the end of the year. But
yes,
yeah, I do kind of like A&M plus 2.5 at home in this spot. Like, I do like them kind of matchup wise against Ole Miss. I always like betting on a team when like everybody in the world is just collectively like they're screwed, they're awful, and it's like
that is a good spot.
Yeah, like nobody's as bad as we think they are that week. So I kind of like them there. But I don't know if I'll real life bet it, but I like it.
I think I disagree with you on this. I think it's not so much about A&M. I just think Ole Miss is really good. Like, I think Ole Miss has some pieces that can really do something. And A&M.
What's Zach Evans' status though? Because
that was
Nick Sussa of the Clarion Ledger had a really well put point of like, that entire team is kind of designed on you have two great running backs. So your tempo, and you can rotate. And then once you only have one, even though he's great, the calculus kind of changes. And I think it's a really good insight. Yeah.
And Quinshon Judkins is good, but we're talking about a true freshman here. So
good point. Yeah.
That's putting a lot on him. And A&M has a defensive front that can hold up against them, but we'll see. I think Ole Miss is balanced enough to win that game. I'll be curious to see. Kyle Field brings it pretty consistently.
Yeah.
But the general vibes emanating from Aggie Land are so sour at this point that
it's hard to imagine getting 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what that environment's like. I will say props to A&M fans who really do, even when the chips are down, they really do bring it. But we'll see. I'll be excited to see that ball. I think it's gonna be a good game, but I like Ole Miss to win that one. Going on the road, coming off of that, I think you might see an angry Ole Miss team. I think Ole Miss is just better than A&M right now. So I don't think I expected that coming into the season. But you know what, Brody? I'm a fan of competent offensive scheme. Sue me. One of those teams has one. One of those teams does not. And A&M, do something. Do something. Don't keep doing this, please.
You have to eat cottage cheese
for the sake of your fans, for the sake of those of us who have to watch college football games. A&M is not Iowa. They're not San Diego State. But, boy, they are not far from
just maybe one tier ahead. Yeah.
I watched a lot of Jeremy Pruitt Tennessee football. It looks a lot like that.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. Don't, please, competent offensive scheme. That will do it for this week's Football and Grits. Brody, it's been fun.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. And we will see you guys next week. For Brody Miller, I'm David Ubben. Thanks again, guys.